Jesse Russell is the father of digital cellular technology.
The internet was created by black people.
Because if I'm a Nazi, then there's millions of young people that are following a fucking Nazi.
Supercomputers were invented by black people.
A decade later, my supercomputer hopeful became a new internet.
Search engines, mobile cellular networks, personal computers, and even console games were invented by black people. I know, it sounds crazy, right? We will show you the receipts. One of the enduring arguments used to diminish the humanity of the black man is that black people are of lesser intelligence. And to that end, all tools are used to try and support that notion, from craniometry to IQ tests. But there is an uncomfortable fact that stares in the face of those who haven't done their homework. And it is the long, almost ridiculous list of black inventors who, despite the constant and systemic disfavoritism, have contributed some of the most consequential inventions of our time. How can you create a scale that says that black people are at the bottom while they invented the internet, cellular networks, video games, PCs, writing, math, religion, medicine, astronomy, money/coins, architecture, algebra, world map, philosophy, standards of measure? And I wish this was hyperbole. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that black people are low IQ, and then they go on to invent the most consequential inventions of our times and in history. If any of the inventors we are going to see today were of European descent, you would not hear the end of it. Case in point, we all know of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, who are known by all. Oh wait, Henry Ford didn't invent anything, and both inventions he is attributed to were actually from two black pioneers.
I think the only manufacturer in the country, and what's interesting about the Patterson Car Company, it was in Ohio. Their cars were considered higher quality than the Model T cars that Henry Ford had.
The DeRay brothers, Ford and them stole it. That's why all over the world, Ford never gets credit for inventing a car. He gets credit for mass production.
The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of one every 40 seconds.
Until that, they take one car and put it together. One car and put it together. But where did he get that from? George Washington Carver.
And the famous Edison, well, he didn't invent the light bulb. Not only did the light bulb exist before Edison, but the key invention that made the light bulb usable, that key invention was made by none other than Lewis Howard Latimer, the son of former forced servants that had escaped to freedom. Let that sink in. His parents were forced servants, and he goes on to transform the light bulb into what we know it as today. But you probably know all of these already. But one person you probably didn't know of is the inventor of the digital cellular network, the person without whom our modern way of life wouldn't exist. In the field of engineering history, Jesse Russell is known as, quote, the father of digital cellular technology, or better yet, the hidden architect of the cell phone. Some of his patents include the Base Station for Mobile Radio Telecommunications Systems, 1992, the Mobile Data Telephone, 1993, and the Wireless Communication Base Station, 1998.
I was the first to finish high school. I was the first to go to college. I got picked up as a young kid to go to a special class learning about technology and science, which was Fisk University. I had two professors. They had said to me, if you want to go and get into research and development, you really need to go to Bell Labs. But they didn't think that I could make it at Bell Labs. And it turns out I did the interview and I had like 4 or 5 offers, right, from from Bell Labs, right? I was the guy that introduced microprocessors to the Bell system.
And to prove my earlier point around IQ, Jesse Russell was only into athletics until he was given the opportunity to attend a summer educational program in Fisk University in Nashville. That's when he fell in love with engineering, where he went on to get a life-changing scholarship. So how many Jesse Russell are hiding under college to athletics pipelines today? We will never know, but the growing success of HBCUs are starting to rectify this wrong. If indeed black people are not at the bottom of the intelligence scale, then Jesse Russell will not be an exception. We should be able to find others like him. We have already seen some, but many of us haven't seen the father of the video game cartridge. This subject was amongst those suggested by the Patreon members. So look for Without History on Patreon and join the conversation. Gerald Jerry Lawson was an artificer in electrical contrivances and one of the very few men of African descent to be counted among the engineering ranks of what would come to be known as Silicon Valley in the decade of the 1970s. Whilst in the service of the Fairchild Semiconductor Company, Lawson conceived, directed, and brought to completion a remarkable instrument of household amusement, the Fairchild Channel F, first presented to the public in the year 1976. It was the earliest domestic electronic game apparatus to employ interchangeable game cartouches rather than diversions fixed immutably within its works, a full year in advance of the now famous Atari 2600. Prior to this, most consoles had games hardwired. Lawson's team refined a removable ROM cartridge system based on an Alpex prototype that allowed users to change games. His Channel F also introduced features like a pause button and a new 8-way joystick he helped design. While the Channel F had modest sales, its cartridge-based model was soon adopted by the Atari 2600 and became the industry standard. Lawson is often called the father of the video game cartridge. He later founded VideoSoft, one of the earliest black-owned game development companies. Lawson's parents were a major force in his success. They ensured he received a good education and encouraged his interest in scientific hobbies, including radio and chemistry. In addition, Lawson said that his first-grade teacher encouraged him on his path to be someone influential, similar to George Washington Carver. When people who have been brainwashed about the capabilities of black people state their argument, it might actually be proof of their own lack of inquisition and lack of intellectual curiosity and analysis. Because just a bit of curiosity would have allowed some of them to realize that the famed Apollo program would not have been possible without these ladies that they call the computers, literally human computers, who were so good at computing orbital rocket trajectory that astronaut John Glenn would not fly until the girl, Katherine Johnson, the black woman here pictured, had checked the computer's calculations. Can someone please explain to me, how on earth would anyone base the success of their entire moon program on the mental capacity of a being with low intelligence? In fact, the premise itself is lacking intelligence. Although these women don't technically qualify as inventors, many others do. Like Marie V. Brown, who invented home security systems, while at the same time inventing the video doorbell, the precursor to the digital doorbells we have today. And there is such a long list of women inventors who are black that it would take too long to cover. But there is one little-known inventor in particular whose story illustrates perfectly the general arc of what happens to black inventors in general. And it's the story of Mary Kenner. From her early childhood, Kinner gave singular proof of her mechanical genius, having, at the tender age of 6, set herself to invent a self-oiling hinge, an endeavor far beyond the usual amusements of childhood. She completed the patent application for her invention of the adjustable sanitary belt in 1954, and the patent was granted in 1956. The invention was described as an eliminator for chafing and irritation normally caused by devices of its class. However, the company that first showed interest in her invention, the Son Nap Pack Company, rejected it after they discovered that she was African American. Kinner never made any money from the sanitary belt because her patent expired and became public domain, allowing it to be manufactured freely. How many women do you know who use feminine hygiene products? I know the question sounds crazy, but this question isn't as crazy as turning down one of the most marketable products in history because the inventor was black. It is more common than you think. If equivalent deals given to mainstream American inventors were given to African Americans, we would have an army of billionaires today. Most business deals aren't sealed solely on the basis of the value of the product. Most are sealed based on the connections we have, and this is where the sting of discrimination is felt the most. Decade after decade, potential black entrepreneurs have been denied grants, loans, and early round funding, not just in America, but in Africa it manifested as a denial of funding by international institutions for countries that wanted to have programs of industrialization. Yes, you heard that right. Organizations like the IMF would deny funding to African and Caribbean countries for infrastructure projects and industrialization projects. So, as soon as there was a different funding alternative, like China or Russia, they switched. But this came at a cost. Or maybe this is all a ploy to keep the black man back, just as Dr. Chris Grandison explained so eloquently.
On a group of men like that, by using, the political, legal, and economic institutions of your society to restrict them.
Documented evidence of widespread acts of discrimination against Black Americans that have put them at a disadvantage in just about every economically significant domain of life. That's textbook neo-group selection. I'm economically selecting against you, I'm restricting you, I'm harming you, I'm not helping you, I'm less likely to do anything for you that's going to economically help you out.
So if you can control cultural institutions and have that structural power, you don't need to be as physically masculine as the other group of men.
The same applies to disfavoritism, applied to the black woman to make her less desirable. This worked for decades until women realized that men are actually drawn to the physical attributes that come naturally to black women. Given the known history of the Western world against the black man over the last 200 years, the ratio of meaningful inventions by black people would, upon second look, be abnormally high. And no, I am not talking about minor invention for which people grant themselves fake patents and tap themselves on the back. I'm talking about really civilization-changing inventions. Inventions like the PC, the personal computer, invented by Mark E. Dean. Mark Dean is a computer engineer who is credited with the invention of the architecture for the IBM personal computer, PC, in 1981. As a young engineer at IBM, Dean was on the elite Project Chess team that developed the IBM 5150 PC.
It established a standard that others could build to, and it opened the industry to lots of possibilities. That was that and allowing people to build the exact same thing and call it IBM PC compatible established industry. That's what created what we now know as the PC industry, and where companies were selling literally millions of systems. That particular interface and the way that we enabled the industry to build the exact same things and establish that compatibility, that allowed customers to buy from different companies.
How old were you when all of this breaks?
I was in my late 20s.
He himself holds 3 of the 9 original patents for the IBM PC, including 2 for the system's monochrome and color graphics adapters, work that led directly to the development of the color PC monitor.
Dean also invented the industry standard architecture bus, which allowed easy plug-and-play expansion of PCs with peripherals. In computer architecture, the bus is arguably one of the most important components. It allows all the different components of the machine to interact and transfer information. In the late 1990s, he led the team that created the first 1 GHz microprocessor chip at IBM. Dean was named IBM's first Black Fellow in 1995 for his outstanding technical contributions. Dean's innovations propelled the PC into the mainstream. The IBM PC and its compatible design opened the door for personal computing worldwide. The color graphics adapter made graphical user interfaces and color displays standard, and the ISA bus fostered an entire industry of PC-compatible add-ons. By shaping the PC's hardware and later advancing supercomputers like IBM's Blue Gene, Dean played a key role in the information age. For an oppressed group with supposed low intelligence,
these examples are inconceivable. It seems that reality is showing us one thing, but financed media is trying to convince us of something else entirely. And to prove my point, how many of you knew that the electric microphone was invented by a black man?
Dr. James E. West is an acoustician and inventor who co-created the foil electret microphone in 1962 while at Bell Labs. Working with Gerhard Sessler, West developed a novel microphone design using an electret, a permanently charged polymer film that converted sound into electrical signals with high fidelity. Compared to previous condenser mics, the electret microphone was simpler, cheaper, and did not require bulky batteries. By 1968, it entered mass production and rapidly became the industry standard in audio. Impact. Today, nearly 90% of all microphones produced annually worldwide are based on West's electret design. These tiny, sensitive microphones are used in telephones, cell phones, hearing aids, cameras, laptops, virtually every device that captures sound. West's invention made compact personal electronics, like smartphones and smart assistants, possible. He holds over 250 patents and received the National Medal of Technology in 2006.
Envisioned for their young son.
I very definitely disappointed them when I switched my major from pre-med to physics. They were very upset and thought that that was the end of my career. But I can't blame them because at that time, teacher, lawyer, doctor were the main professions that blacks were permitted to enter.
But perhaps the most surprising of all black inventors is the Nigerian-born Philip Emeagwali, the one the community calls the father of the internet and supercomputing. Philip Emeagwali is a Nigerian-born computer scientist whose work in the 1980s demonstrated the power of parallel computing, foreshadowing the modern internet.
A brain that enshrouds our earth. In year million, I foresee each post-human person as a super intelligent cyborg that is part human, part machine, and part computer, and that has a great sense of humor.
In 1989, Emeagwali programmed a connection machine supercomputer with 65,536 processors to calculate 3.1 billion computations per second, simulating how oil flows through a reservoir. This achievement won him the Gordon Bell Prize, often called the Nobel Prize of Supercomputing,
in 1989. His method connected thousands of processors in a network, in effect using principles similar to Internet packet switching for computation. Many popular accounts have dubbed him one of the fathers of the Internet, because his breakthroughs in simultaneous distributed computing helped validate designs for networked computer communication.
Back on February 1, 1922, a science fiction story was published in a book titled Weather Prediction by Numerical Process. That science fiction story described how, in theory, 64,000 human computers could be employed and used to solve the partial differential equations that must be used to predict the weather for the whole Earth. Back on June 20, 1974, in Corvallis, Oregon, United States, the day I began programming supercomputers, I set my mind on programming the fastest supercomputer. A decade later, my supercomputer hopeful became a new internet that is a new global network of 64 binary thousand processors.
Well, once you have the Internet, and you have an explosion of content on that distributed network, you need a way to be able to quickly search through that mountain of data. And here again, we have another consequential black inventor. Alan Emtage is a Barbados-born computer scientist who, as a grad student in 1989, created Archie, the world's first internet search engine. At McGill University, Montreal, Emtage was frustrated by the manual process of finding software on FTP servers. He wrote a script to automatically gather directory listings of public FTP sites and built a searchable database named Archie, short for archive without the V. By 1990, users worldwide could telnet into Archie to search for file names. Archie quickly became hugely popular. At one point, it accounted for half of all internet traffic in Canada.
I think we all had a sense that we were working on something that was going to change the world to an extent, but I don't think any of us really conceived of just how pervasive it would become, just how deeply embedded into society, how something like the smartphone would come along and you would just walk down the street and all the people were doing would be staring into their phones. And the only reason they're staring into their phones is because it's connected to the internet, right? If the phones weren't connected to the internet, yeah, you'd be playing your little games and stuff, but most of the time you wouldn't be staring into your phone.
Even digital telephony was pioneered by a black woman. Dr. Marian Croak, now a vice president at Google, was the chief inventor whose work transformed analog telephone calls into digital communication. Her breakthroughs in VoIP made modern internet calling, video conferencing, and mobile communication possible.
So I had an unconventional childhood in that my parents gave me so much freedom to explore. And my father was a person who always encouraged me to ask why. And growing up in Manhattan as well, it expanded my horizons.
I really had to ask people what was going on at Bell Labs, and I learned that brilliant people doing remarkable innovations there, and so I was hooked.
So voice over IP is simply running a voice communication, having a dialogue with a person over the internet.
And most of the people in Bell Labs and AT&T at the time did not believe in VoIP.
Dr. Marian Croak is an engineer whose inventions have made internet communications like Zoom or Skype calls part of everyday life. In the 1990s and 2000s at AT&T Bell Labs, Croak led research into transmitting voice over data networks. She holds over 200 patents, including a Core 2006 patent for Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP technology. Croak's work involved converting voice signals into digital packets efficiently and reliably, at a time when phone calls were still largely analog. Her innovations in IP switching, error correction, and signal quality made it possible for services like audio-video conferencing, online phone calls, and streaming to become high quality and commonplace. In addition, Dr. Croak developed a text-to-donate system for mobile phones, first used widely after Hurricane Katrina, 2005, to raise funds via SMS, a method that raised tens of millions for disaster relief and is now standard for charities. As a kid, she was entranced by plumbers, electricians, repair workers who came to fix things in the house, watching how systems worked behind the walls. This lasted until she attended the University of Southern California and got a PhD in social psychology and quantitative analysis in 1982. Oh, what's the price of constantly inventing? Well, she accidentally lit her house on fire, and she turned that experience around into a life lesson of resilience. One of my favorite black inventors is Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson. She invented new mathematical models for how electrons move through materials. These models help scientists understand how to make better semiconductors, the tiny components inside all electronics.
Well, engineering is rooted in fundamental science, and those things give us perspective about who we are and the world around us. But engineering also happens to be challenging and fun. And all of the questions are not closed in.
The biggest.
Today I have the privilege to present our nation's highest honor for scientific and technological achievement, the National Medals of Science.
To be in the White House, to not just stand next to the president, but have him actually put the medal around my neck to do the whole thing. That was, I say, one of the proudest moments of my life.
Or again, Kenneth J. Dunkley, the man you can thank for today's immersive movie experiences. The New York-born inventor is a leader in holography, most well known for his invention of three-dimensional viewing glasses in 1986. His patented design used an array of lenses to create a realistic 3D image and depth perception, which is the basis for the modern-day 3D glasses we use in movie theaters. Despite being over 80 years old, Dunkley continues to innovate in his domain. As the president of Holospace Laboratories, Inc. in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, and there are so many influential black creators like Granville T. Woods, or Andrew Jackson Beard, born a forced servant in 1849 and then emancipated 15 years later. Andrew Jackson Beard is known as the man responsible for the first automatic railroad car coupler. For those unfamiliar with train design, this component is a mechanical device that connects two rail cars together to form a train. Before Beard's invention, it was very dangerous for railroad workers to manually connect and disconnect rail cars in order to form trains. Or even Valerie Thomas, who is another incredible black innovator who made countless contributions to the world of technology. She was an inventor, physicist, and NASA scientist who became famous for her invention of the illusion transmitter device. This device uses flat images to create three-dimensional illusions and was used in medical imaging, weather prediction, and military defense. Why am I bringing all these inventors up? Because they will have you believe that intelligence can be measured with proxies like IQ. And then they display charts like these ones to our kids to have them believe that their ethnicities determine their intellectual capabilities. But this is what they don't tell you. There is a 1999 study called Turning Performance Up or Down with Identity Primes. In this study, two groups of Asian females were primed.
one with their Asian identity and the other with their female identity. The group primed with their Asian identity performed better than control. But what is even more shocking is that the group primed with female identity performed worse than control. This means that psychological priming has a significant and measurable effect on the individual's ability to perform mental tasks. So now I want you to imagine that you are negatively primed, not for one experiment, not for one day, but for decades. For decades, you are led to believe that you are lesser than. This has a disastrous effect. If anything, even with the incessant mental attack and lopsided field that black people have had to endure, if there is any proof here at all, is that black people are absolutely amazing and represent a force for creation in humanity like we have not witnessed anywhere. Through this adversity, the descendants of the Kemet are pioneers in many of the most consequential inventions in tech. They are the modern-day philosophers. They are the modern-day trendsetters, from fashion to social media. Oh, one more inventor. The algorithmic backbone of apps like Instagram has African fingerprints on it. The Ghanaian technologist Iddris Sandu wrote and sold key algorithms to Instagram, and went on to build core systems used by Snapchat and Uber, helping shape how these platforms work behind the scenes.
My supercomputer hopeful.
The new age of the black woman and the black man is here. The new Kemet is here. And just like we did before, we will build monuments which will become the bedrock of humanity's joint future. If you want to join the conversation on Patreon, follow this link here.
I was the first to finish high school. I was the first to go to college.
I think we all had a sense that we were working on something that was going to change the world to an extent, but I don't think any of us really conceived of just how pervasive it would become, just how deeply
the biggest.
Today I have the privilege to present our nation's highest honor for scientific and technological achievement, the National Medals of Science.
To be in the
If you want to listen to some of the amazing tracks we use in our videos uninterrupted, follow the link here or find it in the video description.
On a group of men like that by using, the political, legal, and economic institutions of your society to restrict them.
Documented evidence of widespread acts of discrimination against Black Americans that
join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.
Wiley Jones was a former African-American slave who went into Arkansas. He stacked his money up and he became a railroad owner. He owned a railroad system, and the city of Pine Bluff, Arkansas ended up buying his railroad system, and that system is still owned by Pine Bluff right now. The Patterson Car Company was a car company founded by former slaves, African-American men, and the Patterson Car Company was the first African-American car manufacturer in the country, I think the only manufacturer in the country. And what's interesting about the Patterson Car Company, it was in Ohio. Their cars were considered higher quality than the Model T cars that Henry Ford had.
The DeRay brothers, Ford and them stole it. That's why all over the world, Ford never gets credit for inventing a car. He gets credit for mass production.
The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 40 seconds.
Until that, they take one car and put it together. One car and put it together. But where did he get that from? George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was never around black folks till he went to Tuskegee. His mother and father died or was killed, and a white family adopted him from Iowa. Black folks in Iowa, except football players. So he went to grade school, high school, and they didn't have no segregation because they didn't have enough people. And so now George Washington Carver leaves after he get all this education come out there. He goes to Tuskegee. Henry Ford came down to visit, like he always see his friend. He said, Mr. Ford, I got something here. Study plants. And see, if you take this back and give it to your engineers, they can build more than one car at a time. He took it back. Mass production all over the world is called the plant, right?
Everybody made joke of him because they said, well, but the plants are talking to him? Is this how he's getting these properties of these plants? And George Washington Carver, in his quiet, dignified way, said, well, who taught me? I'm not saying that they talk to me like they got a tongue, but I can look at a plant and see what it can do for the human family.
The military came to George Washington Carver, and they said, we need you to do something for us. Can you invent something that out of it we can get paint, glue, ink, and plastic? Yeah, I can handle that. They tell me how smart black folks are. I can handle that. So he came back, called sardine. Now you want to hear something funny? The #1 cancer group in America is vegetarians. Because you wasn't supposed to eat soy. When he got to Tuskegee, they thought he was gay. No association with women, high-pitched voice, they thought he was gay.
The finest juice we've been able to make of peanuts is in the treatment of the after effects of infantile paralysis.
And he'd rather for you to believe he was gay than tell you that them white folks that adopted him castrated him so he couldn't have sex with their daughter. Like, who wanted them, huh?